to give a little bit of background of why we are here and what are the recommendations today, is that you have a staff report with several attachments. The staff report recommendations are to receive a staff report for Copenhagen closure, including the diagrams, which is attachment 1. I'll ask Matt to walk you through those in just a second. Also to review the results of the survey, and I just gave you an updated copy of that with the last 109. And to then finally review another attachment that was actually prepared by René Karskov, the chair of this committee, to where he has presented some ideas for design that this committee can then review and discuss after you receive your public comment at 5 o'clock. So the schedule today will be that we started this meeting here for the report and the technical discussion at 3:30. We'll then walk over to Copenhagen Drive to where you can see it in person before you discuss the item. And I had advertised a time set for 5 o'clock, so people would have a set expectation on when they can come and comment. And so the community workshop is actually advertised as a virtual community workshop because we are in COVID-19. Unfortunately, we can't have a full room of people here with us, but we welcome participation by Zoom, and we also allow some participation in person if somebody would like to come and speak, but we only allow a couple of people at a time, and right now we have only a couple of people here with us. So just a reminder of where we were and how this whole conversation came about is in March of 2020. There was the declaration of emergency at the national level, the state level, the Santa Barbara County, and subsequently by the city of Solvang for COVID-19 as a pandemic and also economic cessation. Following that, the state and the county had developed a number of guidelines, the latest of which have required businesses such as restaurants and wine tasting rooms to operate outside only. Actually, prior to that, the council had closed the Copenhagen street through July 4th celebration only, when restaurants could operate both inside and outside. But following the harder closure and only allowing restaurants to operate outside, then the closure was extended, and ultimately last council meeting on September 14th, the council adopted a resolution to close Copenhagen Street through October 31, 2021. So it gives you just a little bit over a year from where we are today for the closure. And they also directed staff to work with the branding and design committee to develop design guidelines and implementation strategy. And they also discussed the working with businesses to create a program to help them with any cash flow needs and the initial investment to comply with these guidelines. So that's where we are today. And at this point, I'd like to ask Matt to kind of walk us through this couple of diagrams that you have and show you briefly what are your limitations and requirements from fire department and safety considerations.
Sure, great. Thank you, Zena. Good afternoon, Chair Kirskov and committee members. I'm Matt Vanderlinden, your Public Works Director and City Engineer. And we have two fairly simple exhibits. The first one shows the existing closure pretty much as it is today. And what's delineated there in the green is the emergency access lane. So right now on the street, the space between the limits of the existing parking, we have some parallel and some angled parking. So from the edge of the parking spaces on one side, to the edge of the parking spaces on the other side is approximately 20 feet right now. And the minimum that the fire department would need is about 14 feet. So the fire trucks themselves are about 8 feet wide, and you want to have about 3 feet on either side minimum, so that the truck doors can open and swing open, and emergency personnel could get in and out and so forth. So that's the absolute minimum. I don't recommend going with that. I think probably about 16 feet would be about the absolute minimum. But right now, just for the sake of clear communications with all the businesses, you know, when they've set up their tables and chairs out there, we've told them to limit it to the parking spaces, because there's markers on the pavement, and they could follow that easily without us, you know, having to give too much instruction. So, so anyway, so right now we have 20 feet. The minimum really should be 16 feet. And one of the considerations is, that's shown in the second exhibit, is access to parking lot 2. So parking lot 2 is we have, all the city parking lots are numbered, and the one there along Copenhagen by the visitor center is referred to as parking lot 2. And so you can, there are no businesses along that frontage of the parking lot along Copenhagen. So you could actually keep, at that location, keep the south side of the street like closed off, or you know, open to pedestrians and so forth, and available for tables and chairs, and then create a barrier, and it could be done decoratively or however you know is desired, but create a barrier that leaves the two middle lanes open for access to in and out of parking lot 2. So that's what's there should be. That's not.
What I got, Matt. You can just describe.
Well, in the packet is correct. So, yeah, so the other benefit of this, leaving that little piece of Copenhagen open for vehicles, number one, it eliminates any problems with circulation in and out of parking lot 2. Right now, you get a lot of congestion in the alley there. It's called Parkway Alley. That's between the parking lot and Solvang Park. So this allows the cars to flow in and out the way it was originally designed. And the other benefit is the Honan trolley has a really tight turning radius, and it could actually continue to use that area for loading and unloading of passengers like they have in the past. But the main thing is it improves the traffic flow for vehicles, and so, you know, the public works staff would recommend doing that, but it doesn't have to be done. So, do you have any questions about that? Yeah. So the
second one.
Yeah, I do, Matt.
yeah, there you go, that one. Yeah, sure.
Is it a two-way there, so that you can drive in and drive out?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I tried to convey that with the arrows in both directions there.
And there's room for two-way and trolley in that space?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Good question.
I think it's nice for residents to be able to go in there and park for farmers market in particular, when, you know, there's more traffic than usual there. But it's interesting, we'll see what the survey says a little bit. I think that's a specific question on the survey too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, on the south side of the street, those parking spaces would be closed off to vehicles, and so the businesses along that side could still use that space for tables or chairs or whatever, you know, whatever use.
It is accessible, however, via the alley, as you said, and that alley is two-way, is it not?
No, actually, the alley is intended to be one-way, yeah, so that's kind of part of the problem. And the alley is used for delivery trucks, but that's usually in the morning when there's not a lot of parking demand or cars there, but also the
Surrey cycle.
the Surrey cycle, yeah, I was trying to remember the name of what they call that, but
So can you explain the worst condition in terms of the impact of, you know, keeping it closed? So what is the nightmare scenario with that parking lot if it remains closed?
Sure. Well, so the worst case scenario is affected by where you have the farmer's market. So if you have the farmer's market on First Street, it's a complete nightmare, because now you have that end of the alley completely blocked. So people have to try to pull in to the parking lot, which is fine off of Mission Drive. That it's designed for that. That was how it was always laid out. They can pull into the parking lot, but now to get out, they have to come out on a one-way where cars are turning in off of Mission. Now they're trying to come out right in that same area. Technically, the alley is wide enough to allow for that, but because of the number of pedestrians and everything crossing from the parking lot to the park and out to Mission Drive and to the restrooms, and there's a lot of pedestrian traffic going back and forth there. The way it was originally designed, which was before my time, but it makes sense. They wanted to limit the number of directions and everything. The pedestrians are gonna have to be watching and everything, so they can kind of just be looking one direction and expect vehicles only coming from one direction. But anyway, so, but if the farmer's market there, yeah, to try to go out, and it's because of the angle of the entrance of the alley off of Mission Drive, to turn in, it's kind of a gentle, less than 90-degree turn. But to come out, you'd be doing like a greater than 90-degree turn to try to come back out. And again, it's never been used like that. So I think there was 1 week where we had that situation before they moved the farmer's market over to Copenhagen. So that's the worst case scenario. But even if you have the farmer's market on Copenhagen, the worst case scenario basically would be when they're, like middle of the day, Saturday or Sunday on the weekends or a holiday, you have all these cars coming in there, and you just basically have one alleyway functioning to serve all the vehicles coming in and out of the parking lot. So it can function, but not very well.
There was also a mention of the Surrey cycle, and just for some additional background, the Surrey cycles operate pursuant to a conditional use permit. There was a condition imposed several years ago that required them to have a painted area and only have the Surrey cycles. The Surrey cycles aren't supposed to go beyond the painted area except for when they're actually in use. And over the years, the painted area wore away. So they started going out into the alley and using the alley for their business operation. And I believe it was about last November or December, the city required them to repaint the blue painted area so that the Surrey cycles now remain outside of the alleyway except for when they're actually in use.
So also the trolley would become part of the consideration in this overall Copenhagen redo, in terms of maybe screening it or creating a little.
If I could ask you to use your mics, and otherwise the public cannot hear you. You're not on
Yeah, if
TV.
you pull it down, and you can, yeah, there you go, pick you up. When the light's on, it's active.
There we go. The trolley, as part of this overall look at Copenhagen, are we to consider something to, like an alleyway that it goes into or something that makes it, this is where it is, especially if you've got cars coming in and out, something really well-defined to protect the trolley and the horses and the people and all that, It sounds like the only way to make that parking lot work is to utilize the in and out on Copenhagen and go to a signal and, get out on the Mission and.
Yeah, Public Works staff does recommend that, it just, you're gonna end up with vehicles backing up on Mission Drive even more because cars queuing into the alley, waiting to get into because now all the cars coming in and out of the alley are like congesting that one little area. And, so you will get back up there. But back to your trolley question. So, I apologize, maybe our city attorney is more familiar, or our city manager is more familiar with the details of the trolley permit, but they operate under a permit, and they've just been granted a multi-year,
No, so with the trolley, the last action that the council took is that they approved their permit, which includes an alternative route, which was reviewed by Public Works, Fire, and Sheriff's Department for safety consideration, which is specifically designed with the closure of both blocks. So they will move to a temporary location, which is now on Second Street as their parking.
Oh, okay.
And then they have an alternative route that is similar to what they used to do, but is somewhat different because of these 2 blocks being closed.
Well, I heard the mention of their loading and unloading there where the parking lot enters and exits. So I was just asking if that's gonna be a consideration, that something be done to screen that off or make it, this is where it goes and cars stay out of there and,
Well,
really well defined.
So
nobody
as the
gets-
city manager was explaining, their permit right now provides for an alternative pickup and drop-off location. So I think your committee can make its decision knowing that they do have an alternative location identified in their permit now. That is workable. I just mentioned it because that's historically where they had picked up and dropped off, but I don't really think you need to factor that too heavy in your
Okay.
decision.
Well, it just seems like with cars coming in and out, and you've rearranged that, the way they're gonna move, having that activity right there is gonna cause some sort of a problem and, potential problem, so.
Well,
I-
yeah, so historically, they did pick up right, just west of the visitor center, on the north side of Copenhagen there. Because cars are moving slow there and there's a lot of pedestrians, there's a crosswalk and everything, and the trolley moves slow, there hasn't been a problem in the past with cars going in and out of the parking lot historically. And then the trolley pulls in and, well, actually, I think historically they would approach from the east and then just pull up to the curb. But it does have a really tight turning radius and it could, with the second, alternative of closure on Copenhagen, it could turn around there, so.
Okay, I was just asking if we were gonna consider that, so that's.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be a major part of
Okay.
your consideration.
All right,
And we can look at that as we walk in town too, kind of look
Yeah.
at the area.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Good point.
So Matt, you talked about fire trucks width.
Mm-hmm.
What about the height? If we consider hanging lights, which everybody seems to like.
Oh, I think, I looked at the little graphics in here of the lights. I don't think that'll be a problem. Yeah, I mean, we will, off the top of my head, I don't know the exact height. It's something like, the highest lights at the top, maybe like 9 feet or something. And on the fire trucks. I think that the lights can be designed to be just a few feet higher than that and have no problem.
And
Yeah.
what about the technicality of hanging them? I just do design intent. You do the mechanics.
Well, actually, this last year, city staff historically has done a lot of the tree lights and things. But also there are vendors out there that provide the lights and can hang them as well. And one of the considerations would be, the scaffolding or structure or whatever that you're decide to hang them from and how you want to do that. But yeah, there's no problem with implementing any kind of lighting that you might envision on Copenhagen.
That's good to know, and I did talk a little bit IDK, because they had done this before, about how it worked with the light. And a big fan of the kind of metal standards that they had to use to do that. But they had another plan, had they, gone ahead with continuing to provide those services. But it did involve needing to talk to some of the property owners, I believe, for permission to utilize the rooftops or building areas to hang the lights from. So I hope
Yeah.
we can do something like that, because it
Yeah.
really makes a big difference to kind of make that ceiling, so to speak, and it
Right,
should be
right.
gorgeous for the holidays.
Right,
It was kind of sad that the only time it was here was during those longest days of the year. And now as the days are getting shorter, I think that's one of the things I've heard, and I personally think would be a big improvement to that, defining the area. They also gave a budget for it, so that was gonna be later on, one of my questions, as to the city, if there's a budget for any of this, which, we can come up with grand ideas, but there has to be a way to pay for it as well.
Any more questions on this part? If not, we have just the surveys to go through as well.
I just have a quick question, Matt. As we walk around, is there something we should be looking at for limitations, opportunities? Not really being familiar with what we can and can't do down there, other than
Sure.
you've given us the size for the fire lane and.
Right. Yeah, good question. So you have to sort of differentiate in your mind this temporary condition of the next few months or several months versus a more beautiful, grand, complete redesign if the city council and you all decide to close the streets permanently. Then you have opportunities for art and, fountains and cobblestones and all these kind of things. So right now, we can come up with different means of coning off or barricading the ends of the street. We have those green painted bollards that are there that are removable. If you like that, aesthetics are not really my specialty, but so something more decorative that's low cost could be, some of that could be changed out if desired. But I think it's really mainly just having the ability for emergency vehicles to get into the area and out. It's really the main concern for this temporary type of a condition. So,
Okay, good, thanks.
So that's what we're looking at, is solutions to a temporary closure.
Yes. So what the city council approved so far is a closure through October 31, 2020. So, repaving the road to make it prettier and eliminating parking spaces would be prettier, but it would be costly without making it
Right, but I mean,
permanent.
it's temporary
This
because
is-
it's got a time frame on it.
Right,
Right,
And so, you're not tearing things up and,
right.
okay.
And the city is engaging in a kickoff of a general plan update to where there will be the opportunity for the city to do a visioning process, which could include, discussions of more permanent closures for Copenhagen as well, and the design element. So that is something that the council's motion also included, but as in further steps for consideration down the line. It
Okay.
would take planning commission and the council actions to actually make those decisions.
Before we walk downtown, I don't know, does anybody have any idea how many businesses are actually doing business on the street or have been approved to do so? I'm not quite clear on that process, but.
So, we can estimate, I think it's about 1, 2, 3, 4 restaurants, I want to say, about 4 or 5, tasting rooms.
So that is pretty much where I was going, which was, I always like to design to function, and so I'd really like to understand what we're solving for. So are we solving for those existing businesses and then serving their needs, or are we solving for them plus additional respite for tourism to enjoy the street, right? So to me, in my mind, it's one or the other, right? So it's just the businesses or it's both,
Well-
So I don't know if we have thoughts about that or.
I guess from my perspective, I would say, and actually there's a portion in your report in there that's included that I didn't go over, but Copenhagen Street and that closure is also part of the marketing strategy and what it's doing for the city. So really, the design is not just to help the businesses do better, it's really to have a piece that represents city of Solvang that is going to be here with us to market and to present the city while we're in this COVID-19 conditions, under the temporary conditions. So I think that's a big part that you are really solving for the city of Solvang, and then the businesses are part of it. And if you decide on design guidelines, that's obviously going to be a regulation, kind of an imposition on those businesses. And that is why we would be working with those businesses, shall they have, financial needs to have a repayment program, et cetera.
So I would just add, kind of an answer to your question. We've developed the temporary encroachment permit that we've been issuing to the businesses. So we've been getting requests from all different kinds of businesses, so not just restaurants and wine tasting rooms. So I think you kind of want to think of more holistically of like all potential businesses plus the existing ones that are currently using it. Yeah.
But I mean, it just seems like the goal is a temporary standard that can expand into something permanent. So, it's gonna have its limits, and it's sort of clean up what's been done there and make it more unified. I mean, is that sort of a
Yes,
Yes,
that's
I
correct.
think
simpler way
so.
of putting it?
Yes.
Because, we can come up with all kinds of crazy ideas, but if it is a temporary or a stepping stone, we should be limited in what we're gonna suggest, and the things be movable and,
Right, so
Yeah,
yeah,
so-
this does not include an option of, we're gonna put a fountain in the middle of Copenhagen. That is down the line.
Basically, you should be able to turn the street upside down and shake it, and whatever
Right.
Falls down.
falls down.
Right.
Gone, right?
Okay,
Like,
good.
well, I was thinking, really, aren't we talking about being able to roll it up at night, right? And make it secure. It's not necessarily even things that maybe even stay out all the time. I mean, if you think about it in terms of the ultimate flexibility and utility, then you could actually put things away if it was really inclement weather, super windy, and I like where you were headed so far with the design intent, because actually what that says to me is everything is mobile for the most part, and you're really not putting things in that are so permanent that they become either a hazard or an obstacle.
Well, I would just add, I think you're correct that, we're not thinking that this, I think of this as a two-phase thing. This first phase is, from now till next October. And then sometime near the end of that period, the city council will have to make a decision to do something permanent or continue it the way it is or eliminate it. And, but whatever is done, I would recommend that you not have an idea of things being put away at night, because that's a lot of extra work and cost if you're going to want to try to put stuff away at night or whatever, kind of like you were saying. So it doesn't have to be anchored into the ground, but it's stuff that, well, if it is windy, if it does rain, it's going to be fine, and it'll last and look nice through the, next year.
I was thinking more of the things that, as Rennie put in the presentation, things like umbrellas that could be moved, or heaters, or more like he said, if you shook it upside down, the things would go away and you could put them away, that type of thing, rather than a built-in canopy or extension of that model, so.
Okay.
Well, and as I understand it too, the existing kind of little structures that were put up to start with, I understand there's 20 of those, and that's why I was kind of asking how many businesses and what the intent is. And it's really good to know that it is something that's not just for the businesses, but it's for the community and for the visitors as a whole. So creating an inviting walking area where there's places to sit and congregate as well.
Right, exactly. I think the intent of the closure that IDK put together originally with the parklets, and yes, that's something to remember, that it's not only a design for the areas. The design is for allowing social distancing and really utilizing that street. So it's not only for the businesses to be able to expand, but it's also for the city to create those social distancing opportunities, which, we had parklets, so you could recommend something different, but it would need to be part of that design.
Yeah, just to add, since you mentioned those parklets, so the ABC permit that the businesses that serve alcohol obtain require that the area where they serve alcohol be fenced off somehow and delineated. So you just want to keep that in mind as you think about.
How solid does that fence
It-
need to be?
It can be a rope. It
Yeah.
just needs to be.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
I have a question regarding so it could be differently approached if owners know it's going to be permanent. Is there any chance for this closure to be permanent? Because I see like 15 people were against it. Are they people from businesses on Copenhagen or just
So-
random people?
Right, so this survey, I did not ask people to identify who they were. We could, refine and add additional elements as we go forward. But as far as the permanent closure, the city is in the process of starting a general plan update, which is a long-term planning document that really sets the vision for the city of Solvang, which includes an update to the design guidelines, so the look and feel, the brand of the city. It will include economic development element. It also will update the land use, how you use land, circulation for traffic. So it's kind of the bigger planning document that will look at 10 and 20-year horizon. And so the starting of that conversation is going to be about 6 months worth of conversation with the community and visioning process. So if part of that visioning process is the desire for a permanent Copenhagen closure with fountains and everything that may go into that, then there is a process that you go through with planning commission where they look at it, and with the city council would have to be the final authority to move forward with that. And as part of that process, this branding and design committee is thought to be part of it in terms of the design guidelines update.
May I please ask you all for today's purposes, and I'm going to sound like a lawyer for a couple of minutes, so sorry, but I was asked about a potential conflict issue. I'm just going to run through it real quick. Rennie owns a building that is on Copenhagen, obviously. There's some very specific, what are called materiality standards under the Fair Political Practices Act, depending upon what the type of activity is that's being reviewed by a board such as yours. My opinion is that because Rennie's property is a commercial property containing a business entity, including a rental, he very clearly, for today's purposes and today's agenda, falls within some materiality standards that are pretty high. It would require that the decisions that you all are making would have the likelihood of increasing his gross revenues or property value by $1 million, or increasing annual gross revenue by 5%, or decreasing expenses by more than $250,000, or 1% of the total gross revenues and more than $2,500. I believe that what you're looking at today and what you're being asked to consider today, which is just these potential design guidelines, would not push him past any of those points. And so I believe that we are safe. Potentially, as you start talking about things that are more than a year off and that could involve changes in land use along the street or physical improvements that are significant and substantial, we could start pushing some of those envelopes and we could fall into the other rules. So again, I'm asking if you all, for today's purposes, could limit yourself to the design guidelines. And then I'd also like to make really clear that one of the reasons why my opinion is what it is that the City Council has already made the decision for the period between now and the end of next October that the street is going to be closed. And so you all are not being asked to make that decision, which making that decision could in fact have a significant material effect on a property owned within the Copenhagen area. So with those, again, just in general, I would urge you always to stay with the item that's agendized. I understand there are wonderful things that your creative minds are running to, but for today, if you could stick with that, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks.
So do we have any more questions on just the parameters, or are we ready to move into the survey? Looking like we don't have, okay, no questions. So this was a survey that's pretty brief, that went live on Monday of this week. It was posted on our website. We did an email blast to businesses in Solvang. We also walked, as I mentioned, the Copenhagen street and adjacent blocks and gave hard copy to those businesses. And we also reached out to utility customers who have signed up for email option, which we have close to 500. And so far responses have been coming in pretty quick. I had 10 responses within like the first hour. We are up to 105 at this point. So in your packet, you have the original responses, which we were at 70 as of yesterday. And now we're at 105, which I gave you a hard copy of. So the first question was, are you in favor of Copenhagen Drive closure through October 31, 2021, between Alisal and 1st Street and between 1st Street and 2nd Street to accommodate COVID-19 social distancing requirements and allow businesses to operate outdoors? Responses are positively yes, and that's great to see. Right now at 105 responses, we are trending at 71% being yes. So we're still staying with the same trend on this one. Now the next question was, what type of business should be allowed to operate outdoors? As you know, on Copenhagen Street, we have a mix of businesses, and I expanded even a little bit beyond that. And we've gotten different comments from the community on some of them, because some of them are not, the restaurants are not the appealing look for Copenhagen. But at the same time, right now, we don't have any city guidelines that are more restrictive than those of the county or the state, which actually allow all of these businesses to operate outside. We have had some discussion with retailers on the street, and one of them, Zfolio, actually requested to be able to have sort of a display outside. It's not them bringing merchandise and actually selling on the street, but just to be able to have a display so that they're more visible. So we did authorize that one. Nobody else has come up with that request so far. Originally, some of the retailers wanted to actually expand onto the street and bring boxes of shoes and whatnot and sell on the street. But that was not the original agreement or what we had authorized. So this shows here that there is an overwhelming support for restaurants being outside. There's also a strong support for the wine tasting being outside. Those are 100% for restaurants, 91% for wine tasting. And then there's 69% support for retailers to be able to operate outside. So something to consider.
Just jump in. This is one of, I think, a great example of something that is going to be a particular way during COVID and would require some significant change, including review by the Planning Commission and then ordinance change by the City Council. If this were to become permanent change, the city actually only allows outdoor patio area to be used for wine tasting, restaurants, and I think,
For permanent, yes,
yeah.
just to clarify.
So again, anything beyond our current process with the permits from Public Works for encroachment would require an amendment to the ordinance.
Right. So what we have advertised online right now, which was one of the original actions by the city council when COVID-19 originally hit, was that they eased guidelines for signs and basically expansion to outdoors. And we created a really simple, expedited way to help businesses originally to expand outdoors. Then following that, there was also an ordinance that became permanent change for restaurants and wine tasting to be able to permanently create patios for outside. So this is really talking about COVID and particular to, the survey is particular to Copenhagen Street. And so with that, there's a massage place that is actually operating right now on Copenhagen Street. It was the only business of that type. The state guidelines allowed it to operate outside, so it has been granted a temporary encroachment permit at this point. We don't have any hair and nail salons, but I thought it would be good to just throw that in to see how the public and everybody is feeling about hair and nail salons, just in case we do talk at any point about broader city guidelines, and they're supported at 49%. And then the next question is, what is the most important element for design guidelines? So we had the options of cohesive look, functionality to accommodate weather conditions, and flexibility and affordability. We're having 46% of folks saying that cohesive look is the most important thing. 33% are saying that the functionality is the most important, and then only close to 20% are saying flexibility and affordability. Next question was about what should the design for Copenhagen Drive closure emphasize? The options were cohesiveness at 28%, old charm Danish town was overwhelming 71%, not surprising, and then modern look got about 12%. I'm just going to look on this one to see if anything changed with our new results. And yeah, we are trending the same way. It's 31, 71, and 10%. So the next question is, for specific elements, what elements would you like to see in the design? 69% are supportive of lights. That's a popular item. 62% like the cohesive furniture look. 71 cohesive barriers, and on this one they were able to click on every one that they were supporting. It wasn't limited to one. 62% would like to see more plants. 59 want to see more umbrellas. 33% do support the parklets, and only 14% support tents. And then the sixth question is the last question that relates to the diagrams that Matt was mentioning to you. This is something that we originally heard some feedback on from the community when the closure was implemented. So I did include this in the survey, and that says, should the closure between 1st and 2nd Street be modified to partially reopen the block to allow for traffic for flow to parking lot 2 from Copenhagen Drive? And we are getting about half and half, slightly more on a yes at 51% and 48% with a no. I've been kind of watching these results as they come in, and it fluctuates. It's once in a while the green one is higher, once in a while the blue. So I'd say this is probably the most split vote on this one, to where we really get just the 50-50. With that, that concludes our staff report. If you would like to ask any more questions, we are here to answer any questions. Otherwise, we could transition to your walk to Copenhagen Drive, and then we'll be back here before 5 to begin the public community workshop.
I do have one question before we go uptown, just for clarity on restaurant seating. And where they're allowed to do it versus where the sidewalk is? Are they allowed to have it on the sidewalk and in the street, or both, one or the other? I think,
Yeah, very, very good question. So they're allowed to have tables and chairs on, both on the sidewalk and out in the roadway, in the parking space areas. And the sidewalk width varies as you go up and down the street, but in all cases, they have to leave a 6-foot wide path of travel for pedestrians. And typically, that's the area right up along the front of the business, just because the way, kind of at the east end of Copenhagen, when we have the buildings that extend out, and there's that covered kind of walk area. So just to stay in line kind of with that, and just in looking at having, if they do have tables and chairs, and they want to fence off one, they will only want to fence off one area, and so they can have the tables on the outer part of the sidewalk next to the street, and have the fencing, one like fenced area enclose both, parts. So that 6-foot path of travel in front of the building has to be
Okay.
left clear.
up against the building. Okay.
Correct.
I just wanted to have that clarity on
Yeah,
how that
good,
works.
good, yeah.
What's the average depth of that sidewalk?
I think it varies from like about
Yeah.
10 feet to like 16 feet, something
Okay.
like that. It varies quite a bit, actually, but, yeah.
Okay.
Matt, I'm just thinking in practice, there are some places where, in fact, there are tables up against the building, and I'm thinking in particular at Belgian Cafe, which, as I recall, had an encroachment permit for the sidewalk before we started this. So is it in fact the case that there
Yeah.
are exceptions to the mostly along the wall?
Well, Belgian Cafe, their seating is towards the curb. So along the front of the building is 6 feet clear, unless they've changed something, but
No, I
I've
believe
gone
the
out
rest
a
is
number
the
of
same.
times, and, yeah.
I
so-
was there this morning, and they have a couple of tables.
Okay, well, they
Right
might
against
be,
the
they might be, they might be
Well, that's why I asked. for
pushing the
some
envelope a little
clarity.
bit.
And massage is legal in,
By the state of California and the county of Santa Barbara, yes.
and, okay. So looking at, because one of the things I want to look at too is kind of the visual corridor and how it looks with the tents that have sides on them. And I'm sure that people are going to be more inclined to do that as the weather starts becoming, not so great, gorgeous as today. So,
Yeah.
thanks for
So,
clarifying.
occasionally, some people do take a little liberty, or they have different staff during the week than on the weekend or something, and they, don't get it quite exactly right when they set up their tables or whatever.
Technically, can we talk while we walk, or,
Yeah, would you clarify some of how, are we
are we allowed to say, well, that looks great, or that looks bad?
taking notes and
So,
coming back?
so in fact, this was noticed, and the public could come and walk with you. I would just urge that if there's any public who comes and walks with you, that we all try and figure out, let's talk loudly enough without, scaring people away, but so that any of the public who is with us can hear the discussion.
That'll be challenging at farmer's market.
Especially with masks.
But I think Rennie was, this is like two people talking, but we're, as a group, even though we may be separated, we're as a group out there, but
So it's a challenging time with your masks and with COVID and everything else. I would say try and limit yourself to, if you have a side conversation, to just two.
okay.
And then don't go find a third person and have the same side conversation, and then, find the fourth and the fifth. And if there are issues of significance, again, I would urge you all to, when we get back, repeat those issues of significance so that the public can hear and participate.
Okay. Okey-doke.
Right. All right.
Okay, we call the re-journey of the meeting. We're continuing with a virtual community workshop, September 22nd at 5 p.m.
Thank you.
23rd.
At this point, if you would like to make any comments about so the committee, for everybody who is online, met at 3:30, received a staff report and had a more technical discussion, and then went and walked the Copenhagen street closure and just returned here for 5 o'clock as advertised for the community workshop. If you would like to make any comments at this point, and then we'll transition to the public comment in the community workshop.
Well, I'd just like to state that Rennie and I had a few conversations, and he pointed out something I think is really important in what we saw out there. There's so much obstruction of the architecture on that street that I think that's a huge aspect of what's wrong with what's there now and needs to be solved. And boy, once you look up and see that, it's really apparent that that street is just kind of been masked off with all this stuff. So anyway, that was pretty much it.
Well, I can speak to a couple conversations that I had one-on-one with members. One that, because we went on Farmers Market Day, apparently we were able to see it today in the first time that Farmers Market had the vehicles parked along with their goods on Copenhagen, and that I've actually received multiple messages from public while I was out in the form of text that that was really restricting the traffic or the foot traffic flow, and of course also that visual of the downtown area. Also that the signs with the big banners obstruct the visual and are quite large in some cases, so maybe need to talk about that. As well as the standing signs that are in walkways. The other comment was about, I think now I've learned that it's a non-compliance with some of the seating along the sidewalk, that there needs to be a mechanism for enforcing, hate to say that, enforcing the rules fairly across the board. And then I wanted to add that in walking around and in driving previously, the parking signs that the city has added during this time are helping as well. It's an improvement to circulation. I think that covers it.
I will only add that I talked a little bit about the lighting existing, the Christmas tree time, holidays, temporary lighting from the existing access at trees, and how that was done previously and was successful, as well as the temporary lighting that was done vis-a-vis the IDK and how that was done, and temporary I forgot what he called it, but the type of wire versus permanent wire, and the accommodation by the ownership of properties to have a more permanent, higher level lighting option.
I didn't make any.
Comments?
Well, in theory, if everybody said they talk to each other and they didn't mention me, then I shouldn't have anything either.
Okay. At this point, we can open the discussion to public comment. Generally speaking, the City Council holds public comment to 3 minutes. That is something that the community is used to, so you could apply the same standard. We also try to accommodate those who are here in person first. So if there is anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this particular item, which is the design guidelines for Copenhagen, please come in one at a time, just to the podium.
As a pair, since we own the same business.
Yes, please.
Is it all right if we take our mask off? Is that okay?
Yes.
Hello. So we understand that you're the design committee and you're working with what's already been approved by the city council, so we're fully aware of that. But we did want to voice our opinions because they were not able to be heard at the city council meeting. We were there on Zoom, we had our hand raised, nobody called on us. For a good hour and a half, our hand was raised, I have pictures of it and everything. But, and so then we did try to interject, even when you had gone to the next topic, and we were not allowed to talk about our opinions. So we talked to several other businesses. We realized the city council came to the, to approve keeping the closure going for another year without speaking to any of the businesses. And so we just didn't feel like that was right. So we kind of took it upon ourselves to speak to businesses and spoke to several who had varying opinions, understanding what we needed to do to get through COVID as far as restaurants and eating and that kind of thing, but not understanding of keeping the closure going as long as was approved. So we kind of wrote it in letter format. Several businesses turned letters into us, and we have packets for each of you if you'd like them, so you can digest. And again, I know you're the design committee, but I'm hopeful that maybe you can pass that along.
And let this sit until the new council comes in. Because we had so many businesses today who want no part of this. We don't want it shut down. Our customers don't want it either.
I'm sorry, for the record, I may have just missed this, but could we get your names and your business?
Michael Braun,
Sorry.
Diane Braun, Pebble People, and that's what we had on the Zoom meeting, was Pebble People.
So I think that's
Yeah.
pretty much it. It
Pretty
says
much
it in
it.
the letters. We just wanted our voices to be heard and help other businesses in town voices to be heard as well.
Thank you.
Do you guys want copies? Maybe?
I can take those and distribute them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have anybody else here in the audience that would like to speak on this item?
David Rasmussen, 1697 Copenhagen Drive. I think what the city council and IDK did back in March or April to close the streets for social distancing and was a great thing, was a good thing. And when the restaurants were allowed to serve outside only, it's a great thing that they can move out into the street. I'm concerned that we're losing 55 parking places. I'm concerned that we are losing our small town specialness. You know, most of these walking streets are in larger cities, and they're doing that to have something cozier. And we have a cozy town, and we should celebrate the architecture and the small town flavor that we have. So I'm in favor of keeping the street closed as long as the restaurants aren't able to serve inside up to some point, maybe 75%. But once that point is reached, I'd like to see the street opened again. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else in the audience that would like to speak?
Yeah, I know this is going to be a big issue. It is a big issue for sure. But I think personally, I think Solvang is very good looking the way it is with the closure of the Copenhagen Drive. I think it's beautiful. I think it's the best we can do for the time being. But why not just take it half a year to half a year, see how it goes until this is over with, and maybe we look for something else again. We open it up again. But for the time being, I think it looks good and it works. As you see, there's people in town and they're up and down the street. And whether they buy anything or not, I don't know. Dave says they're not buying anything. It's possible. I don't know. But did they buy anything before? Okay. But to make it prettier, for sure, what they do in Denmark, I'm from Denmark myself, so I know how they do it. So I see a lot of little towns, small towns with walking streets, pedestrian streets. And what they do is they put a planter box in the middle of the street, not a very wide one, a narrow planter box that could be removed easily, back and forth, in and out, and that really dresses up the street. And whether that's possible, I'm sure it's possible here too. It is possible, I know it is. But that would be an easy solution. Get some planter boxes with pretty, beautiful flowers in it, and move them in here, right in the middle of the street, so you know, it dresses up the whole town, the whole street. And then when we are done with it, take it away again. So use it as an option, and it doesn't have to be closed down all the time. You know, not that, it doesn't even have to be closed down for a whole year. Once this opens up again, we can open up the street again, I think. But for the time being, the restaurants and the ice cream parlors and the other places, bakeries, it's good for them. Whether it's good for the gift shops, it might not be, I don't know. Anyway, that's my opinion. But a planter box in the middle, they do that. I don't have a picture of it from Denmark, but they're doing it all over the place over there. So, and then when they're done, take it away again, and then open the street up again. You haven't lost anything. No permanent thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any more speakers in the audience?
Hi, Linda Johansson. I'm owner of King Frederick Inn with my siblings. I think that the pedestrian street is going to be a topic well past when I'm gone. When I moved home about 35 years ago, we were discussing it then. I think during COVID, it's the perfect solution. And it's allowing the businesses to actually have some business, and it seems that the tourists are actually enjoying it. I do think after walking down there tonight again and really taking my time and looking at it, I really thank all of you for your time of serving and trying to get some consistency down there. I think we can do a better job of what we have for sure, and make it look more inviting. And I look forward to that. And it might be that, in a year from now, the merchants downtown will change their mind. One never knows. But for now, it's certainly serving a purpose, but I think we can do it better. So thank you very much for putting your time and energy in there to make it look better. We need consistency, and we can do a better job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Claudia Orona, and my family owns the Solvang Trolley Carriage Company and Solvang Trolley Ice Cream Parlor. I'm a resident of Solvang. I have also hosted festivals of arts and music in Solvang for a variety of years. I am very pleased to hear that you have noticed that all of the pop-ups and the banners not only take away from the architecture, but also take away the visibility from signs from other shops, which is very troublesome. Under the previous guidelines of the BAR, businesses were working with very constricting guidelines as to not compete with other visuals in the city. That means that anything that is big and out of code clashes with these guidelines, and it takes away visibility from other businesses, which is very impactful, particularly for shops that are smaller or away from the location between First Street and Alisal that tend to have higher visibility. The street closure also makes it challenging because I get the feeling, I will look to see if more people feel the same, that whenever the street is closed, it impacts traffic, and people tend to stay where the street is closed, but they don't keep walking towards the other ends of the town. So that's another thing to consider. I am aware that you are in charge of just design and look and branding, enforcement, and whether it is closed or not, it's up to you. My concern is also about how we are gathering information. I don't think there has been enough information gathered as to how business owners, visitors, and locals feel about the street closure. I am aware of the survey that was sent out. The survey consists of 6 multiple choice questions. and there's no way of knowing who filled it out, whether they are a business owner, a resident, or a visitor. And so it's hard to tell where the opinion is coming and who it is serving, whatever decisions are being taken. So I would encourage you to look at that, making sure that you are gathering data that you can work with. That being said, I think that parking and traffic is still a problem. I don't think that we have enough information or enough support to keep the street closed beyond surviving the pandemic. And again, I will echo the feeling of the owners of Pebble People that right now you are operating under the suggestions of a staff that acts at the pleasure of the current city council, and those people might be completely different in a few months. So that's something else to keep in mind. Thank you.
It's up to you, Chair, if you would like to.
Come on.
This one's more of a branding comment. Michael Braun from Pebble People again. As far as the farmer's market goes, San Luis Obispo has a great farmer's market. It's on Thursday nights. It's packed every Thursday. If you guys move the farmer's market to 6 o'clock on Friday night, our store would be open. Every week we would be open because it would be such a moneymaker for us. So maybe a good thing to do is just move the farmer's market, close down the entire Copenhagen Road at 6 o'clock on Friday night. And then we have a walk street for people to come out on. Bands can come out there, but we'd be open. Something to think about. Thanks.
Okay. Looks like this is all of the individuals here in person. Now we have quite a few people joining us for the virtual workshop. Thank you for being COVID friendly and being with us online. If you would like to make a comment over Zoom at this point, please raise your hand. Use the little hand signal.
I don't know how to do that.
So we have somebody on the phone. If you want to go ahead and please speak. We'll take you first.
Jennifer.
Please state
Jennifer
your name.
Stoney, Lions Peak.
Okay, go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay. First, a couple of things. Firstly, I received the information about this meeting on Tuesday afternoon. And beyond that, I've never had anyone contact me on a committee regarding anything that they're wanting to do on the enrichment of Copenhagen, which I've volunteered numerous times as being a professional ASID interior designer and a business owner there with a wine shop for 16 years that does more high-end product. What I can tell you from what the City Council has done for my business and closing Copenhagen, and I want it on the record, is that you have allowed my business to continue in business with the encroachments that have been done. Without what has been done, and if you had kept Copenhagen open, I would not be here talking to you today. It's between the City Council and the Chamber working with the SVC, if I'm saying those right, that have allowed my business to continue. Now, as far as customers are concerned, I can tell you what I had before COVID-19 on Saturday with having 3 people working for me versus me being a senior citizen in COVID-19 and my partner out there serving tables, which we do willingly to keep our business going. I am telling you, with what has been done, our business is enriched 2 to 3 times from what we were doing with the streets opened. And when I look at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday, I have significant sales. Not only do I have significant sales, do I have customers that sit there and tell me how much they love what we are doing on Copenhagen. Yes, I agree. Architecturally, it's a nightmare right now. I'm not crazy about loud rock and roll music that people look at and wonder what is going on and some of the architectural elements. But I can tell you, in a world with what we've gone through since March, without having what we have now, you can thank God every day of your life for what the city council has done for Solvang, because without that, I would be in Solvang packaging packages that were only from online, nothing with customers coming to Solvang. And to think about parking on Copenhagen, they had 50 plus parking spaces that were empty. And if you want to utilize parking, you have veterans create something, like be creative, like they do at Disneyland, have a tram running, do something that's more Danish, make the town where it is really a novelty, specialty town, other than just little shops that, well, I think I've said enough. I think you understand what I'm saying. I think we have the opportunity to make Little Denmark, truly Little Denmark in the United States. People are coming from Los Angeles because they're seeking more of that ambiance. Create Copenhagen into that ambiance.
Thank you,
That's
Jennifer.
all I have
It's
to
been 3 minutes.
Okay, that's it. Have a good day.
Thank you. Do we have anybody on Zoom that would like to speak? Please raise your hand. We have quite a few people. This is the community workshop for public comment. Please raise your hand if you would like to speak. I see no raised hands, but just to be safe, even though everybody should be able to raise their hand or unmute themselves, why don't we go ahead and unmute everybody, just to make sure there's anybody unable to unmute. Yeah, try that. I think actually if you click that, you can, yeah, there you go. So we have a few unmute. Do we have anybody wanting to make comment on this item? Just go ahead and speak if you'd like to make a comment.
I would actually just like to make a comment about one of the businesses that have put hay bales out into the street.
Okay, so if we could, this is an item for design guidelines for Copenhagen Street. We are taking the public comment for that specific item right now, and if you would like to make a comment on that, please go ahead and state your name and residency, and then speak.
My name is Julie Vandekar, and I'd like just to make a comment about one of the businesses that have put hay bales out into the street. Is that okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think it's great that they can open their business and be out there in the street. But my only comment is they've gone beyond the parking space. And you actually, when you drive by there, you have to go out into the street to the other lane of traffic coming at you. And their hay bales, they come off and they get out into the street. And that's like ice for a motorcycle. So it's actually kind of dangerous.
Okay. Is that the end of your comment?
Yes.
Yeah, the city will look into that business.
Thank you.
Can we please continue to unmute everybody just so that everyone that's on here is unmuted, just to double check? You can ask to unmute, yeah.
Yes, I have a comment.
Okay. Do we have comment? I see Ginger Cleland. Any comment? Please unmute yourself. Jamie Baker, John Padfield, Julie Vandekar, Julep, Ken KYT News, Mark Infanti, Randy Oprog. If you would like to speak, please unmute yourself. Okay, I see no public
Yes, I have
comment.
a
No,
comment.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, please state your name and speak.
Yeah, this is Daniel Greenwald, Belgian Cafe, Solvang.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So my concern for the closure of Copenhagen, I'm all for it. I think it's great. The city is sprawling, people are traveling. My concern is the safety of pedestrians because we have a 6-inch curb that is a tripping hazard. So I'm not really sure if the city has liability insurance to cover that if a pedestrian trips, because obviously they'll be walking to businesses other than the crosswalks. So my concern is there going to be anything put up against them as far as a ramp? Are they going to be painted yellow? It's about a safety concern for the pedestrians and the customers of my business. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any more public comment?
This is Kim Jensen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I like everything that's gone so far regarding Saturday and Sunday. I'm not in favor of Monday through Friday. I don't feel we're doing well with it. But I truly understand where the restaurants they need to be open. And I think under the circumstances, Copenhagen needs to stay closed. But as someone had mentioned earlier, David Rasmussen even, how we look, and we got to change that look because for the long term, once we get out of purple and we get into red, hopefully, and the restaurants will be inside, if you still want to keep it closed, it's got to have a glow to it if you're going to go in that direction. But then I still think I have so many customers here at Ingeborg's that can't come in. They can't come in. I can't drop off. And I'm sure there's other people that have that issue, but we want to give them a time maybe that we would have it open during the week for a period of time so they can come in to pick up and get stuff if they want and know that if it was an assigned time that they could ready that between 10 and 1 or whatever time is made up, that there's a way that people can come in quickly, get what they need that are local, and be ready to, and then they can take off again. That's a suggestion, but I feel like I'm being strangled, especially during the non-weekends, because we're just held, it's quiet. It looks like an airport here during the midweek. So, but when we do have the restaurants open, I like that. If the restaurants were closed and they were not here, it would even strangle us retail people more. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more public comment? Please just go ahead and unmute yourself or raise your hand, either option. Just give one more second here.
Could I say one more thing?
Go ahead, please.
Jennifer Stoney again. I don't see why you can't combine both, where there is parking and the Copenhagen somewhat closure. Maybe if you have the review committee, in Europe, it seems to me that they did have parking spaces and then they did have that ambiance. Why can't you look at Copenhagen and be creative where it becomes the best of both worlds for everyone?
Okay, thank you. I believe we don't have any more public comments, so you can close the public comment and transition to discussion. I have just a couple of items I'd like to clarify based on what people said. For your knowledge, the farmers market was recently renewed their permit by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission takes that action, but they did permit with enough flexibility to where the city manager can work with the Farmers Market Association to potentially move to other locations. The music on the street at this point is not allowed by Santa Barbara County, so that is something that we have, or IDK has looked into before and wanted to propose, but it is not allowed at this time. So as we think about the closure during COVID time, that may not be a possibility. As far as the survey is concerned, that was we're working on a short timeline. We just got you all onboarded a couple of weeks ago. This is your special meeting to kick off this project or process once again. This is the first step of community outreach. That survey definitely can be modified, and you're welcome to speak on that item as we go forward. And then finally, the business that was mentioned with the hay is actually off Copenhagen, but you can make general comments about design as well. Thank you.
Ben? Yeah.
Ben Olsen again from the Red Viking Restaurant. In regard to Greenwald's comment, yes, I see that's very much of an issue right there. But at the Red Viking, Thomas, he has put a red, no, not a red, but a yellow duct tape all around on the curb. And there seems to be high visibility right there, so you cannot miss it. I mean, people can still trip there for sure. But put a red and orange tape there for sure for the time being. I think that's a good idea. But thank you, Greenwald, good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, you still have your report in front of you with the 3 recommendations, and you can discuss this topic in general, take comment from the committee.
Okay.
What are the recommendations that you're referring to here?
So the recommendation was just to receive the staff report, which you did. We held the virtual community workshop, and at this point, you have the point 3, which is for you to review as part of this. You can discuss definitely the public comment, what you saw, but you also have in your packet the review of the design guidelines that were put together by Rene as the chair, which are included with this packet, so you may use that as a discussion item as well.
I just have one clarifying question before we get started on what Xenia said. On the music, was it live music that was banned or digital as well, or?
It's live music that's banned. It's basically anything that creates an event, and so live band music is
So
considered.
background digital music would not be?
No, there is a noise ordinance that might impact, the level of sound, but it's not banned per se.
All right, thank you.
Right.
Well, Renee, since you
Well-
pointed at me,
Maybe I'll start out first.
yeah, I think that'd be good.
I want to thank for all the comments, and I appreciate some of the residents pointing out we're not here to decide whether Copenhagen Drive should close or not. That's already been decided. We're here to recommend the look and feel or the design of Copenhagen Drive. So what I did for today, and I did this because we're 5 people that meet once a month. We're not allowed to talk in between that once a month, so it's a little hard to work together, and design needs cooperation and collaboration. So it's really hard for 5 people to start with a blank piece of paper where they can't even meet and talk. So I figured I'll start with something we can either tear apart or build upon or take pieces out of that we like and begin with that in mind, because otherwise we're not going to get anywhere even before October 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So I can go through it and say what I had in mind, or maybe that's the better way of doing it.
I recommend that you go through it
Okay.
and, yeah.
So based on what I heard and what I think we all heard, we wanted a more cohesive look. So I started with the words like speed, budget, cohesive and stylish look, non-overwhelming look, blending in, and temporary. And budget was very much considered here because I assume that the city doesn't want to spend $500,000 on a temporary solution. I like the street seating, and I like the sidewalk seating wherever possible. Matt touched upon it. You said 7 feet. I kind of calculated with 6 feet as a possibility. I stole, maybe I can take this, better for everybody to see, right? Can you put this here somewhere? And we can see the other side of it. So the drawing,
Is it in the packet?
It's in the packet as well, yes.
yeah, it's in the packet. So the drawing at the bottom, I kind of stole it from Mayor, what's the mayor of New York?
De Blasio.
De Blasio, yeah. He sketched it up, and it kind of outlined the seating, the sidewalk seating next to your building. You can't exceed the frontage of your building. That's what you're limited to. You gotta allow the 7 or 6 feet or whatever we decide to pass, so you can't block your neighbor. So if you're a restaurant, you shouldn't be allowed to block your neighbor, who might be a retail store, from people walking by. I kind of like Mayor de Blasio did. The seating, we went out to the parking, which you're doing at the moment. It's easy to understand, and I think it's very important for all the retailers, restaurants, et cetera, to have an easy to understand way of doing this. So if it's out to the parking line, that's where we went. Then with the whole idea of Solvang is beautiful, this Danish old charm, the barrier should not compete with this. So I picked these green barriers that kind of blends in with the trees that's already on Copenhagen Drive. They don't take away from the architecture. We have 2 options. There's one with a black bottom, and there's one with no bottom. And the black is kind of picked because it matches the asphalt it's going to sit on. It doesn't steal away from the Danish architecture in town. It's supposed to blend in as much as this can do. Now, there's a lot of, I Googled everywhere and did the whole Instagram thing. There's a lot of cool barriers around the US at the moment, but they're in places like New York City and Venice Beach, and that is not Solvang. We don't want rainbow colors in one place, red colors in another, and etc. It just doesn't match Solvang because our image is the look and feel, and especially the architecture. So that's what I had in mind. The furniture, I saw in the survey, which I hadn't seen before I did this, so I'm glad some of the wishes was matched in the design here, but cohesive furniture. I specifically did not pick that because I don't know if the city has the budget to go out and buy furniture for every business that desire to have outdoor seating. We could go with a black furniture. I know some people already have furniture. Would it be fair that we kind of roll in and say, throw that away and do black? I don't know. That's luckily, well, it kind of is our decision, but it's a tough decision. I said umbrellas should be what you cover with. They need to be one color. We don't want stripes. Then the next guy, he wants rainbow colors. Then the one guy wants red hearts on it. They need to be one color. Each business can have, in this rendering, we have a business with blue colors and we have the one next with red colors. They need to be made of cloth or linen or non-fading material. We don't want it to, after 6 months, look like, whoa, this looks terrible. I think we should encourage planters. Again, they should be black to blend in and not steal from the streetscape. I think we should encourage flowers. What we have down there with plants in pots, I mean, they come straight out of the pots from Home Depot. The price tag is not even taken off yet. We shouldn't allow that. We shouldn't allow green pots, yellow pots, white pots. We're going to be straight back to the mishmash if we do that. So I suggest black pots that blends in with the asphalt and don't interrupt the look of Solvang. At the end, well, I've seen this elsewhere. There is an option of putting wheels underneath these if you want some further flexibility. Not that I think the business should move these every day, but for farmers market, fire, whatever, you can put wheels underneath. It's an added cost, but it's possible, and it makes them flexible. With the budget in mind, I think what happens behind the barriers stays behind the barrier. I mean, that needs to be up to the business and the city, depending on what kind of budget you want to spend. I did put some images of planters that looks decent. I did outline what we don't want. Lights, everybody seems to like the light we had in the past. I like them too. I think they should be white only. I never gone down a street in Denmark and see colored lights everywhere. It just doesn't exist. I don't think it exists in most Northern European towns or cities. We should probably discuss the best way of hanging these. I like this look. It's pretty good, but doesn't mean there's not looks that's not better than this. I don't think I need to get into the parking access. We kind of talked about it. This was just a suggestion. And the last bit of it, I call it permanent closure of Copenhagen Drive. It's not because I want to get into the permanent closure of Copenhagen Drive. It's kind of to reiterate, we're doing this temporary. We're doing this with limited money. Yes, of course, we would like cobblestone everywhere, but we're not going to do it for 12 months. Yes, we would like water fountains like Storkespringen in Copenhagen or the Caris well, etc. But we're not going to do it for 12 months. Yes, I would like cultural statues in the middle of Copenhagen Drive, maybe. But we're not going to do it for 12 months. And it was more to point that out. And that was kind of the whole idea, so we have something to start with. Thank you.
Thank you, Rennie. I really appreciated you taking the effort to put that together. I really am supportive of the guidelines in the packet. I think only with a few minor tweaks. I think the commentary in the survey was one of the Danish look, and I guess I just would want some more discussion around the black modern barrier option and black planters that are more very modern and seen in upscale modern environments, and if there might be something that we could do to make it more traditional or transitional, to make it feel more as part of the greenscape and maybe less modern. Another thing that I loved about it was the umbrellas. And I do think that there is a little bit of an individuality that people might want. So maybe it's more than one color, maybe it's two. Or some to make it maybe a little bit of more variety, which is debatable, rather than just one primary color. Something to at least consider, not every color, but maybe more than one. And then I think the only other thing was the lighting. And while I love the overhead lighting, just because it could be potentially complicated or costly, I think we should entertain the idea of maybe keeping the streetscape trees lit constantly, continually all year round, rather than maybe just at holiday time as an option. And those were my primary thoughts about your packet, but I really appreciated it and love that you spent the time, so thank you.
Okay, I echo a lot of those comments, and first want to start off by saying great to have a starting point. And I don't think any of us are planning on leaving here today with design guidelines in place and, saying that's what the community needs to do, the business community needs to do. I think this is the beginning of the conversation, but it's a conversation we want to have on kind of an expedited schedule, because this doesn't really do any good if it takes months upon months to implement. And I do think it's really important to have the community input on this, because ultimately, especially the businesses have to support this idea to move forward. I do like the black planters. I've been to Denmark, and what I love about it is the mix of very contemporary and old world at the same time. And I think the black planters can do that, especially if they're certainly softened with flowers and greenery. And, we were looking as we walked today and noticed that there are quite a few wine barrels. Of course, wine barrels aren't Danish, but in a way, if there was a wine barrel at the corner of the wine tasting areas, it immediately translates to the visitors that this is a wine tasting area. Because having giant banners, I don't think is the way to go. Because I think what's really cool about this opportunity is when you walk out in the middle of the street and look at the architecture of our town, we have this very unique town, and we don't usually get to see it from that perspective. So being able to have those open sight lines, I think, is very important, and cluttering that up with signage that is a very large, I don't think is ultimately going to be better. I love the idea of the light canopy. I hope that there is city funds that can be earmarked for that, and working in advance with the property owners to secure them safely and make them very intentional without the standards in place would be my thought on that. And the white lights, definitely. Let's see. And just that there be a consistency to it. There'd been a mention of the, I think it's called the bollards that block off the streets. I think those could look better than the little yellow chain, and it could be a little bit more intentional, that it would all work together with it. Unfortunately, COVID does demand a high level of signage, and I honestly think maybe there's even a little bit that needs to be added, because I had a bicyclist go buzzing by me in the middle of Farmers Market down Copenhagen Drive, and perhaps it should at least be signed that walk your bike and be courteous to visitors, which was kind of the obvious, but in Santa Barbara, they are allowed to ride bikes. And as a note regarding Santa Barbara, took a drive down there last Sunday with my husband just to check out how it all worked in the downtown closure on State Street in Santa Barbara. And I spent almost no time there because there was not room to social distance, and there was a significant lack of compliance in wearing masks. There were lots of people, lots of cyclists, and there wasn't social distancing. They weren't wearing masks. The sidewalks had seating on them that narrowed it down to where it was much less than 6 feet to go through. So I basically turned around and left. And that's not what we want to have for Solvang. We're going for the exact opposite. We want people to come here and feel that they can walk around and enjoy it, be safe, and not just safe from COVID, but safe in our little community. And I think they love coming here to walk our town. And as we roll towards the holidays, we've got some really nice opportunities to make this even more beautiful with additional lights and enhancements for the holidays. So. And I thank everybody who came to the meeting and visited us virtually to give your input, because ultimately I think it's really important that this information go out to the community. Further in advance would be much better, that we have maybe a little bit broader survey so that we know whether they're a resident, a business owner, a visitor, and just make sure that we do understand that there's overall the consensus is to keep it closed and move forward with these plans. That said, I also understand the city council has decided that. That is where we're moving forward. That's not up to us to do. So we're trying to set up a design that'll work for everybody.
Mr. Chair, just because I think I'm going to have to help write this up ultimately, it would be really helpful, the two items that I think the first two of you commented about included the question whether the higher part of the furniture was going to be tents, or what I'm hearing is instead it would be a uniform umbrellas that would have some limited different set of colors. And so I think it would be good to, if you gave us input on that, we could try and get a consensus on those items.
Be like solid colors, I think was the idea, but then giving a palette of colors, is that what you mean?
Well, I got the impression from the presentation of the starting point that the canvas or plastic look canvas tents are not something that you want to see, and instead what you'd rather see is umbrellas of a consistent nature. Did I get that correct?
I said the color was one color per umbrella or per business, let's say. So this business might have red umbrellas. This business could take blue umbrellas. And if you see in the renderings, they actually match the architecture of those two buildings.
I think
What we don't want is striped umbrellas or
I think my question was, first, are you, and I thought it's what I got, although you didn't say, get rid of the white pop-up tents. But I thought I got from the presentation that instead of
I didn't say.
white or multicolored pop-up tents, again, I think that would be helpful for us. And I think the other thing that would be helpful, we do have the redwood parklets. And so if you all gave us comments about whether you want to see that continue or not, I think it would be helpful in preparing.
I would prefer we stick with umbrellas, not some garage built, whatever you call them, or tents that you bring to the beach. No, umbrellas.
Right, and that's what I got
That's
from.
my
yeah,
opinion, but-
That's what I got from your presentation. I believe that Jennifer was going along
Yeah, I
with that.
concur that I would recommend against the pop-up tents, unless, I guess, there was an exception for the farmer's market use. But other than that, on a regular day, I don't think it's not a good look.
And so Esther, and I was just suggesting, I got a kind of a consistent set of things that you've commented on, and it would be good if we could get all 5 of your consistent comments on those. So Esther, I wonder if you had a thought on the umbrellas.
I think umbrellas look great. I also think that from the city perspective, because those little, the existing, I don't know what you call them, the little parklets, for lack of a better term, that are down there now, the city doesn't have to do anything as far as staff. They're there, there's chairs, there's tables. I guess they have to be cleaned, of course. But my concern about having only umbrellas is that doable from a city perspective? Is somebody going to take them down at night and when it's windy, and how are they handled when it's, those kind of public spaces? So, of course, I like the look of umbrellas better, but is that actually functional and doable?
But I think the other ones will be more dangerous when it's windy.
And that could very well be.
Matt, do you want to comment to that?
Well, I don't know what conversations has been had up to now about the budget, but the way I see it, you can make a list of all the different things out there, and it's pretty well, what Rennie has put together is really great. So you've got the bollards or barricades at the ends. How do you want those to look? And then you have the barriers around the eating areas, like the planters and that type of barrier. Then you got the tables and chairs, and you have whatever it is for shade. So the pop-up canopies, the umbrellas, and then the last item is the lighting. And so, and it was brought up, I can't speak for the city council, but it's not likely that they're going to want to buy all these things for all the businesses. So I think what would be good in those different categories of items, decide what you think would be the best, come to some consensus among yourselves and take a vote or whatever on each item. And then prioritize what you think the city should pay for. And whatever the things you think are the most important that might be difficult for the businesses to manage, as a comprehensive thing, such as maybe the lighting, would be like maybe your top one priority for the city to pay for. And then provide a list that you could recommend then to the city council. So then the city council can see all those different categories, what you're recommending, and and get costs for those different items and figure out how much they want to spend or not spend. And then they can be implemented.
I agree with Matt's analysis here, and just to clarify what the city council did already vote on is for the city to invest in the common areas and then to develop a program with the businesses for whatever is going to be required based on the guidelines that you would recommend, to work with the businesses to create a financial loan type of program where it wouldn't be as financially burdensome to the business.
Before we get into detail, you nailed what I was going to say, is that we're not clear on the elements that we're even going to look at yet. And if we can just simply define the elements that we're going to look at, and you hit most of them, and I think if we define those elements, then we can decide what color we want and
Right.
so on. But we're
So-
so limited time that we need to
Sure,
really
sure.
focus in on these elements and
So maybe,
nail it.
maybe the best thing for this evening is just come to consensus and provide staff with a list of these are the different elements that we want to see out there and make decisions on. And then the staff can come back with additional options for those things. For example, like the bollards. And Esther mentioned that, you know, the chain across the middle, I agree, it kind of doesn't look very good. But we could order, like there's in front of the city hall right here, in front of the entrance here, there's concrete benches. And those could be placed set out in place of the bollards. And you could still leave a gap in the middle with like maybe a planter or something that could be moved if the emergency vehicle needs to get in and out. And so there's different options for things like that. Of course, different things cost different amounts, but, and then you could look at the barriers around the restaurant dining areas, you know, those planters and stuff. So if you make a list of the elements, and then we could come back and present like different options, whatever, for each of those elements. And then you could make a decision. You could say, okay, well, we like this, but tweak it like that or modify it like that, and boom, that's what we want.
So
And we like the
who's-
umbrellas or,
Who's going to come up with these design elements? I mean, Rennie spent some time, you know. Well, so
I
we're
think
going to
that
be,
there's still, I think Rene presented an idea, and it's up for discussion here, that started the framework of those elements. There
Okay.
may be additional elements that you want to add and comment on. And then, yes, we are still kind of, I think we heard 3 comments and haven't heard from 2 on general comments, and then you can dive into more detail on the next steps.
maybe we can just focus on the list, and maybe part of that list is things that we think shouldn't be allowed.
okay, sure.
You know, like that massage structure was,
Exactly.
you know, really, it just didn't look right, so. So,
I
mean,
wanted to ask something. Are we talking right now only about Copenhagen?
Yes,
So no other
no.
things, yes?
Right now, you're
That's
only
all.
talking about the 2 closed blocks of Copenhagen.
So, would anybody else?
So to boil it down, what I heard was lighting, shading, barriers, signage, furniture, planters, right, greenery, right, greenscape. That's what I heard.
Can you repeat that, please?
Barriers,
Lighting,
furniture,
shading, furniture.
lighting, umbrellas, planters,
Signage,
Signage.
yeah,
signage.
yeah.
Oh, signage, yes.
And bollards.
Yeah, and both, yeah, barriers, that's
sort of-
street
You know, it's-
barrier and-
There's 2 different barriers. There's
different
the
barrier types.
bollards and there is
Correct.
Yeah, like the street barrier and the,
enclosure barrier.
And
enclosures.
retail or business barrier.
Right,
Yeah.
or actually restaurant.
Restaurant.
Another thing that you could have as part of this discussion, which was in the survey, is what type of businesses from a design perspective do you think should be allowed to be open on Copenhagen Street?
We are allowed to weigh in on that?
Yes.
Oh,
and the interface, somebody brought up the interface between, you were talking about the wheels on the screens. And so the interface between the farmer's market and a planter that sits on the ground and doesn't move around, and how they function, because we were talking about the possibility of going to 16 feet. And so to operate a farmer's market in that 16-foot area, and the idea is to not have to move the furniture all the time and do all this stuff and leave it as sort of a semi-permanent. So that interface is going to be huge, how those screens work with the farmer's market and the ability for them to set up. And I don't even know how that's going to work.
But it's partially happening already,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, people just have their own barriers with the farmer's market.
Right.
Well, they're kind of filling in the businesses that haven't expanded out. Isn't that
Right,
sort of
right.
it?
Right.
Right.
And so
it's-
Exactly.
just to clarify, so far, the city has not been allowing retailers to expand out. It's only been restaurants and wine tasting places.
So that would be the interface then, is any business that's not a restaurant or an approved use, they're going to slip in between
Right.
and.
That's how it's been working. And what you saw today was an anomaly that wasn't expected, exactly where the cars were actually parked
Okay.
next to the tents.
All right. Well, I mean, to be productive, if we have a list, maybe we should start talking about the items on the list and move this thing forward.
I mean, the idea was, I started on the outside with the barriers, right? If nothing else, the city should come up with the money for that somehow. If you got more money, cover the ceiling, umbrellas. If you got more money, cover the furniture inside.
What about the lighting?
Yeah, what about
The lighting you have to, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's too big a burden for
Okay,
any
so-
business.
yeah,
I mean,
so that's
that's
tough.
for the city.
Well, and you're going to power it up,
That's for the
so.
city.
Right.
Yeah. Can I just clarify on the barriers? It's definitely on the safety barriers for the closure. It's definitely the city's responsibility. Then there is the lights, which is also common investment. That's the city. Are you talking also about the barriers that are enclosures to the specific business?
your
The
black barrier?
black with,
Yeah,
yeah, okay,
I'm talking about these.
sure, that
Yeah.
can be
So
a.
on a clarifying question there, so as we heard, the barrier is required for the consumption of alcohol correctly, right, today? And so if we allowed retail to come out onto the street, the question is, would we want them to have a barrier as well?
Right.
Because
So
really, to sell something, you need access. So it's a different type, it's a side barrier, not a front barrier, right? It's not a full U.
Right, so to clarify, yes, to what Jennifer's talking about is that the ABC requires the businesses that serve alcohol to have an enclosure and signage saying that there's no alcohol beyond that point. That's why those barriers were originally set, and those will need to be in place. And yes, there's no legal requirement per se for a retailer to be on Copenhagen Street. However, we've only, as I've mentioned before, allowed one retailer to have a display case thus far.
How about those, this is like, we are thinking about beautifying Copenhagen, but then, let's say, First Street, yes, and there is a restaurant or wine tasting, I don't know what it is, but they have like a plastic orange, like a fence, temporary, that looks
Yeah.
terrible.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that today's just to kind of keep the discussion a little bit closer, and because we want you to be able to create these guidelines for Copenhagen Street, this was advertised only as Copenhagen Street design guidelines. In the future, other design guidelines might be added to future agendas.
Well, it seems like the planters or screens should be on the city, and it would help it be consistent. You know, here they are, and we're putting them in, and it's consistent, and I think when you leave it up to the individual business, it's gonna be kind of a helter-skelter arrangement, and they're picking a bunch of somebody may have 20 of these things, and the next guy's got 2 of them, and 20 of something else, and it just
Right.
would be a lot more
So-
consistent.
Right.
I think in Matt's suggesting that you also give priority, there are things that you can do from a regulatory standpoint Again, they're getting something from the city, they're getting an encroachment permit. So you can require them to have a particular uniformity in order to have and continue that encroachment permit. Those things, if you believe that they are of such high priority that you want the city to also fund them, I think it would be helpful, again, as Matt had suggested, you give us the list of those things that you want to have happen, and then if there are things that you want to have happen that are of such high priority, or you think from an equity standpoint the city should fund them, please let us know that. If you think it's something, again, the council has talked about doing a financing mechanism. There may be those things that you think are of such high priority they should go into the financing mechanism, but not necessarily, like the lights or the barriers at the end of the street, the city must pay for them. So if you could give us that input, that would be great.
So do you have a list, Matt, that you could read back to us, or somebody wrote?
Sure. So, I'm kind of going from the things the city most likely would cover. So there's the street barriers, or bollards or whatever, and then the lighting,
Yes.
which would be more of a comprehensive thing up and down the whole street. Then we have the seating enclosures, which is I'm calling it the enclosures instead of barriers. The
Screens maybe is a better,
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Seating screens. Then we have the furniture, so tables and chairs in there. And then the shading, whatever shading, and then the signage. So I think there's six items that I.
And planters. Planters,
Oh, yeah,
if you want to add planters in between the screens.
so
Oh,
are
I
we
thought-
saying?
Decorative planters.
I was understanding that the
Maybe
screens were planters.
Yeah, I think I goofed him up on that. So you're talking about just the barrier around the space.
Yeah.
There's a green
Why we do it
screen
like
and there's a decorative
So let's
floral
go with blue and
arrangement.
red
Yeah.
business. Red business has inserted 2 planters.
Right.
Well, I'd like to suggest that maybe we start the priority list with the
Oh, I
obvious.
see. Like the
with
flower
the-
pots.
Yeah.
Yeah. Start the list with the obvious, the street barriers, bollards, and then lighting with direction to maybe ask if staff could also start contacting property owners so that if this is gonna move forward, that they're informed well in advance. I think that was, it's a little off-putting to suddenly have somebody, starting to go up on your roof and work and make sure that you can do it. And,
If you did that in the form, just quickly, of a motion for those 2 items, it sounds like there's probably some level of consensus, and also that those are things that you think are of high enough priority that the staff should prepare a budget for those and take those 2 things to the council.
What are those again? Sorry.
I don't know, are we?
I
are
just
we
don't
ready?
think that we should be taking items to the council one by one without your comprehensive.
So I'm
guidelines.
sorry, I'm just trying to get to an end to this meeting.
And-
And so if you took
But
them.
I don't think that we should be getting to an end of the meeting necessarily.
Well, I'm worried that the priority order may switch up a little bit as we finish up the discussion, so that's why I would kind of hesitate, like, maybe we can have it, like, A, B, C, D.
You can do straw motions, you can do anything like that. It's just, if I heard correctly, there are 6 items. And
Yeah, we
if
added-
if
we added
if you
7.
took a straw vote on 2 of them, then there are either 4 or 5 items, and then you could take those down as further steps and further steps.
I guess,
I
right?
think you're thinking too much like an attorney.
Yeah.
This is,
Not
this
a
is not,
designer.
this is not, let's pick green for this one and red for this one. It needs to be a cohesive look, so
Okay.
I would prefer to do them all in one
Well,
go.
and to get anything done, it's a checklist of items here. We can prioritize, but we need the list. So if we agree on that list that we listed, and then maybe we can come up with a list of things that we don't want to see out there.
Okay.
Right.
And, you know, enclosed tent structures, maybe tent structures, period. And is the parklet that 4x4 thing with the canvas on it?
That's what
Yeah.
we've been referring to as a parklet, yes.
Yeah,
So
I
when you say
think,
tent, you mean the pop-up canopies?
yeah, the swap
Or
meet,
generic common term?
yeah, just, and so if we can get that list defined, then we can prioritize it and then, you know, work through each one. And if it's 2 items that we need to post to, you know, let people know that we're considering are important, then that's what we do. But let's get the list down
Yep.
and
Okay,
eliminate.
So, I would recommend, if I could be so bold as maybe to make a
Yes.
motion for you.
Well, recommendation.
Okay. I recommend a motion to have the list of items for consideration are lighting, shading, street barriers, furniture, signage, seating enclosures or screens, and then flower pots or planters.
Not in any priority order.
Correct,
Correct.
yeah, that's how I wrote them down earlier, but, so, if.
Can I make a motion that we approve that list and move forward?
Is there a second? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I second.
Just say, did you second it, Chair?
You're
Okay.
missing one thing.
So I think there was a first from Brad Marchi and second from Renner Karskoff. Now you want to take the vote?
Yes.
Just say everybody in favor, say aye.
Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Everybody opposed, say aye. Nobody is opposed.
Okay. And then, the second item that you mentioned, Brett, is items you don't want to see. So we've got, pop-up canopies, and was there some other item? I'm sorry.
Anything enclosed, you know, with enclosed walls,
Signage, I think, that needs to be
Banners or-
discussed. Yeah, banners in particular. I don't know if we need to go into that. a
is
little
that
more.
temporary signage or?
Well, I think the bigger issue there is the parklet, because they're hanging the big signs from the parklets. So,
Canopy. Pop-up
yeah,
canopy.
well, the
Banners.
the banners. are-
Advertising banners, yeah.
Are being
Okay,
posted there.
well, we can certainly add to that, but right now we've got the pop-up canopies, any kind of enclosed wall type of feature, and any banners.
And I would like to maybe even take it a step further and say a signage, off-site signage. So in other words, the directional signage for people's businesses that's sitting far away from their business and pointing, you know, because it sits in walkways.
Okay,
I don't know about the
what do
rest of
we, what do
you.
we call
Shouldn't
it?
we just stick with the current signage rules?
Right, so what happened,
I think
just
we're
this,
just
as
lacking
a,
enforcement.
as a matter of background, just to let you know how and why that happened. Yes, there's a sign ordinance. The sign ordinance was relaxed by the city council when the COVID-19 originally happened, and some of those signs have been allowed now to be placed on Copenhagen Street to assist businesses with just direction, so that people know that there's other businesses in other adjacent blocks.
Well, and once those parklets or tents go away, the visibility comes back and the original signage works again, so.
Okay, and if I could make a suggestion, so the two main items, it looks like the city and Public Works would be involved in are the lighting and the street barriers. So, and we'll come back with more information so you can make a final decision, but just so we can do some research. So the lighting example in here, is that, is everyone kind of in agreement that that's the type of, you know, in concept, what we're looking for?
That's the kind of round white lights that are kind of like little globes.
Yeah, but also just the overall feel of it, the height, how they expand the street area. You know, we don't have, you know, power poles or a bunch of streetlights enough where we can, use that as the structure for running cables, but I'm envisioning, in fact, I saw an eyelet on the wall of your business, Rennie. And so you can do, their lag bolts or big screws with the eyelet at the end. You can put galvanized eyelets and do a zigzag pattern and run cable back and forth, and so you can run those. And then the lighting would, we'd put those eyelets strategically located, so then we can run power from, and run the lights up from the existing outlets, you know, either up a tree and then over to the cable or something like that. We'd kind of have to figure that out, but, and we would use soft white instead of bright white, I think is preferred.
So does that mean the warm white?
Yeah, the warm white versus the bright white. The
Yeah,
warm
and-
white kind of has more yellow
And
and the bright white.
actually, these aren't, they aren't white, they're actually clear. Is that what, is it the clear lights or is it the white?
Well, if we're gonna,
White lights are clear lights? I don't know.
I would recommend going with the LED. That's what our tree lights are. It's more energy conserving, and if the city's paying for the power, that would be a consideration, especially if it's, you know, every night throughout the, you know, 6 months a year, out of the year, you know, once.
But the warm
Warm.
LED lights.
Okay.
Definitely. I think it's over 3,000 Kelvin or something.
So just as a curiosity, maybe this is something you could weigh in on as a business owner that might not want to participate. How do you get cooperation with these islets all over
Right.
Copenhagen?
Well, if they're not having to pay for it, I think most of the business owners would be fine with a temporary, you know, eyelet on there, and it's no cost to them or anything, and, you know, when they're removed, the small little hole can be patched, and,
Okay.
yeah, so.
Yeah, I think that's the most effective, is to not create new structure to support this.
Right, right, exactly, that's.
Yeah.
I agree, and I'd rather see, use as many existing elements as possible than adding any additional element.
And I don't know
Right,
that it
okay, good,
necess-
I agree, yeah, I mean,
I don't know that it necessarily has to be a consistent
I agree with that
pattern
as
like
well.
that, more random,
Right.
you know, based on trees and buildings and
Organic.
so on. I think it'd look a lot nicer.
It's probably impossible to do that anyway.
Yeah,
You know,
it
so-
would
Rules
be,
here, you
yeah.
can't do it.
Yeah. And make, and if possible, not have the cords like as obvious. If there's a way of,
sure,
you know.
yeah, we'll try to make it
having
discreet.
those- Yeah, because sometimes they're pretty obvious.
And then as far as the barriers, there's all kinds of concrete structures that are decorative, that are used in parks and things, like the bench right out here in front. There's also big concrete planters. You know, the thought of the benches came to my mind because it's additional seating, you know, and in the cooler months, you don't really need shade. So it'd be out in the middle of the street and not necessarily have shade, but, so any thoughts on that, or? And then after the temporary, if the closure does not become permanent, those, things can be reused throughout the city in other areas. So they're not, won't go to waste or anything.
You can put that heavy duty of a thing in that
Mhm.
area there.
Mhm.
Well, and I think my big thing would be like, can they sit so they aren't like all crooked because the street slopes or something? And then making sure that they don't impede foot traffic. I guess that the chain already does that.
Sure, so any,
These are for the permanent barriers on the ends of the street? That's what you're
yeah,
talking about?
the street barriers
What
on
about
the ends
fire
of the
trucks
streets.
that can get by them?
No,
Yeah,
it
we-
was
we-
removed.
He's
Yeah,
saying leave the gap for the fire.
So we'd leave a gap, and in that gap would be something lighter. But where the green bollards are now, we could replace those with like benches or planters or
My
something.
only concern about the bench at the street is children. If you're setting, you know, if somebody's going and sitting and they use it as a family, often children, you know, so now they're running around the bench and you've got the street right on the other side of the bench. So
Yeah,
that's the
a-
only thing
that-
that comes to
That's a
comes
good
to
point,
mind
that's a
with my
good point. Safety
grandchildren.
is definitely a consideration, yes.
Does anybody have an objection to the bollards that are there now? at the ends of the street? I mean, is there,
They don't look pretty, they function.
Don't you, there's in Chicago, there's the, like they're black and they're, ball at the top, heavy duty, more iron, nice chain, just, they look, there's a more detail to them. I don't know. I'm sure that you could source something that looks a little bit,
Okay, well, we can bring back some other options. I
even,
mean, we could leave the,
Disneyland again was referenced before. I think that's, they have really good ones there.
I think, to me, it wasn't even the bollard as much as it was the little yellow plastic chain.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
right,
well,
Because we could get rid of the chains and the orange traffic cones.
right.
So like
Yes.
in between the bollards, have something more decorative that's easily moved or whatever
A
for
black
emergency vehicles.
planter with flowers.
There you go.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so we'll bring back some ideas on that. Okay, that's all I had.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other elements that you would like to come to decision on today?
Well, I know you mentioned a retail, kind of having a display area in the street, and I was, I'm not hugely in favor of that, but I'm not a retailer, so maybe somebody else up here has other thoughts about that.
Right, so we could talk about the types of businesses and if there is a clear no list as well. We have one massage place there. None of the retailers right now are doing anything outside, and none of them really have requested after the option to have just a display case other than the one business have come forth. So there's only one business that has requested to have a display case on the street. So if anybody would like to make comments
I
now.
don't know what to, I mean, what the expectation will be. For every business, I think it will be different needs, yes? Like, I know there is jewelry store. I don't think they would like to, maybe they would. I don't know. That's why it's,
Right. Well, I think that the guidelines, there's some set guidelines, but there's also guidelines that keep changing at the state level. But I think what we have now is probably fairly representative of the worst case because we're still in the purple category, so we're kind of in the worst, most restrictive category at the state level. And I think from a design perspective, the one comment that comes from other businesses in the public is really just about that massage business there. So as part of a design of the street, you could make recommendations to city council then who would make the final determination on this, not allowing specifically that type of businesses on Copenhagen Street, and it would only apply to Copenhagen Street.
could you allow, like at a mall where they sit there at one of those chairs you bury your face in and they rub your back? I mean, could you allow something like that without a shelter? I mean, if they had to stay in business, to function, but anything on a table out in the street and, the enclosure, it just seems really inappropriate and,
By state guidelines, yes, you can.
but, yeah.
I was just gonna comment, I think the only reason why they had that is with the hot weather in the summer,
Oh.
they didn't want, they wanted the shade, so that's
Yeah.
what they were after, but.
if everyone else can use umbrella, they can also use umbrella. They don't need to build a special, I don't know, pergola or something.
I mean, COVID came out of nowhere, so it's kind of unfair to say you can't operate your business.
Yeah.
So we need to find a way they can operate their
Yeah.
business.
Well, I think about the back area, each of those places, and from Kim from Ingeborg's was mentioning having certain days to have parking there, which really is, it'd be lovely if that could happen, but I don't think that's a practical reality. But if he chose, it would seem like he could have certain hours where somebody could drive up and, be able to help him out the back door, backdoor pickup. Is that something that could potentially go on with the massage place, that rather than using the parking spaces in front of their business, they're using the parking spaces at the rear of the business? And they would have to have something that's maybe a signage at the front that points them around, but they could do that on their window. I don't know, just a thought. Because it's hard for me to say, no, you can't do business. You know, everybody's struggling right now, and that's not, our goal is to make it more friendly for people to visit and do business.
Okay.
But it is the anomaly that is really blocking the visual corridor there and is, you know, a little bit uncomfortable to go by.
But I think that it has it's morphed over time. I do think that they originally started with just the chairs for the neck and shoulder, and then I think that they branched out to the bed. And I wonder if we just ask them to go back to that, you know, neck and shoulder solution outside with the new parameters. Because again, I have to believe that the demand for, or I should say the uptake of someone actually choosing to lay down out there is probably pretty small. I know that they're trying, right, to muster up more business doing it and saying, we're here to do this. But you got to imagine that there's very few people who'd actually be comfortable doing it.
Yeah. So
There's a lot of lounge chair, you know,
Yeah.
whatever they're called out there. I was impressed with the number and wondered if they actually had those filled, and if so, could they actually be social distancing while doing that? I couldn't figure out how you could have somebody actually working on, you know, giving a massage and still staying away and have those.
So we can follow up definitely
Yeah.
with the business and find out more and see if there
Yeah.
is options
I-
on the back.
Yeah,
And
I did want to just mention, one time, they had been encroaching too far out into the street, and I went by to speak with the manager, and they actually had 4 people being massaged, you know,
Yeah.
getting massages.
I have
at that
actually
time.
seen a lot of
So-
people using
so-
it as well.
So they seem like they do it.
But the more private they make it, the more desirable it becomes.
But it defeats the purpose of being outdoors.
Correct.
And then the other thing is as you pointed out, Zena, we're in the red, we're in the most
Purple.
restrictive tier. We're in the purple tier, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it goes to a red tier, maybe they'll be able to have limited services inside, and this will all be a moot point. So,
Right.
but that's an unknown, and this is gonna be an evolving situation that may go from one tier and go backwards as opposed to forward.
Can you just go back and talk to them?
Yes.
See,
No,
because
I
I think we
think
spend a
this
lot of
gives-
time on
Yeah.
one business while
Yeah.
we have 35
I
others.
agree.
Yeah.
I think this
Right.
gives enough about your stance on this, and we can go and discuss it with the business and see
Okay.
what may be the best recommendations. Anything else for today? I think the recommendation was for you to either adopt the guidelines or to continue and provide with direction. I think we've received some direction to where we can do some more research on those lists of options of what you want to see and what you don't want to see. My last question would be, would you be interested between now and the next time, which we can talk about when the next time is for this item, would you be interested in continuing the survey, any other types of outreach? Obviously, if we were to go to paper surveys, that will take too long. I don't think that that's a good option, but we could ask some additional questions online survey. That's pretty easy if there's anything of interest to you.
Can we add what they're, you know, if they're a business or if they're a tourist or if
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
a resident?
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense if people from let's
LA
say-
are
yeah,
voting.
LA are voicing their opinion, but it's not relevant to.
Right. No,
Well, and should it go even a step further, or maybe this is too far? Should it say, are you a business owner? Are you a business owner on the affected area of Copenhagen?
Good
If I could make a suggestion on that, maybe to have 2 surveys. One specifically for the business owner and property owners, and one for residents.
I wonder if there's a way to structure a question that, you know, the retailers spoke about how they don't like the fact the parking's gone and this is closed off. And honestly, whenever I come through town, I rarely find a parking space. And so if I'm coming to shop in one of those businesses, I'm parking somewhere else and walking in there, and that's pretty much typical. unless you get down a little bit farther. But is it COVID that's impacting the business, or is it the closure of Copenhagen that's impacting the business? I mean, because the reality of COVID is, I mean, it's huge. And I don't know that it's really the closing of Copenhagen that's the impact.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't know.
personally, I feel like the parking is an issue. It is an issue. I think that the real big concern is the 55 spots have gone away. It is, you can circle on the weekend right now and look for a long time and just get frustrated and go. And you're right, you got to park like 4 city blocks away and then walk in, which is normal for people who live outside of California. But for a lot of people that, especially locals, that's a long, long way. They're not used to that. And so but it is an impact. It's a real impact. I think, though, where was my train of thought going on this? What I was going to say was a lot of people are not shopping, though. You're right. They're not yet comfortable coming into town to go into the shop to buy, and they'll just wait. They buy online or do something else, and so maybe there's an impact of both there.
Well, and that comes back to staff's recommendation for the reopening of access to the parking lot. Are we supposed to do anything about that today?
There would be, you can make, general policy direction, we'll work that into the next round of
Okay, because that
recommended
wasn't part
guidelines.
of the agenda, right?
No, it's part of the agenda,
Oh,
definitely.
okay.
You can discuss it.
Well, I actually would make a motion that it be opened as per staff recommendation. I don't know if the rest of you.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed, say aye. Passes 5-0.
Okay, and then just to understand our next meeting, when we come back, do we feel as though, I need staff input on this, that there's going to be some conclusive guidelines that will be set in place? And the reason I ask this is for the community to know when they've really got to step up and let us know and reach out to us, because we're going to be making the decisions.
Right. So that is something that we can discuss. Obviously, we got the direction today about your list of items you want to see, a list of items you don't want to see, some of them more specific on those items. I think the Chair's Renee's guidelines were the first skeleton that provided for this discussion. We can come back with recommendations and some budget estimates based on this list now, and with a more written version based on that of the guidelines. If you would like, your next meeting is scheduled for October 8th. So that is just, let's see, 2 weeks away. So that could be potentially a meeting where we bring back to you, a more polished set of guidelines that you can then review and just make final tweaks to. And if you're at that point ready to adopt those guidelines, or in other words, those would go to council for the final adoption, but that would be a final recommendation potentially.
I have one question. Going back to those screens, they are plastic, yes?
Yes.
So how about
I mean, the plants inside them, I believe, is some type of plastic that can last in whatever weather we have.
Fiberglass or something.
How about the sunproof? Because, like plastic changes color very quickly in full sun and then looks terrible.
They're probably
Maybe outdoor.
They're
but
probably a
UV,
resin-based
yeah.
fiberglass of some
Yeah.
sort that's got a gloss coat on it that's not gonna, I mean, if they're a
Deteriorate
quality
that
product,
fast,
they won't.
yeah.
Would we be interested in doing what we, in the outside world, call a model room? Basically, we set one
setup,
up. We go
right.
and buy it, we set it up, we look at it.
I was thinking
'Cause,
it.
I mean, you don't build a
exact same
hotel
thing.
based, you
Right.
don't just say, okay, let's do 500 rooms, right? You build one room first and see, well, it kind of looks like the rendering, I like it.
Or we need to tweak this.
Or we need to tweak it.
We
Or the
could.
picture looked really good, but in reality, it's not as good, yeah.
Possible. Seen it
It's
before.
possible. I think you probably would rather just go with the guidelines and maybe make that tweak before we go full with implementation, i.e. allow the council to review your guidelines, to agree with it, to adopt them, at which point we can start spending some money, but within that implementation plan, there could be this step to where we purchase one set.
A sample.
A sample, and then if there's small tweaks, hopefully, then you could make those as well.
Well, you went quite a ways with your 3D. I mean, that
Rendering.
kind
Yeah.
of shows the picture.
No,
It's somewhat to
I think
scale,
the
so.
sample is important. You want to see texture, you want to see color, you want to see material, I mean, I would also, you really do need to think about durability over time. So, I do think sample is important to check it out before you go full purchase.
Okay.
Yep, I agree.
So with that, are we all in agreement that we would come back with all these recommendations based on your feedback today on October 8th, and that would potentially be your final set of guidelines that you would discuss, tweak, and then set forth for council consideration?
Does that seem doable?
Yes.
I like that.
It's within the, yes.
Okay.
It's a good stretch goal.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. If you would like to adjourn the meeting, unless there's no other stuff.
No other comments?
Let's look at the agenda. There's no other staff comments, so we could
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank